Columbus Blue Jackets forward Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew were killed on Thursday night by an allegedly drunk driver while they were riding on their bicycles. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets is here to talk about the tragedy, what Johnny Gaudreau meant to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and his legacy on and off the ice. We've got that coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The hockey world is mourning the untimely and tragic death of Johnny Gaudreau, the Columbus Blue Jackets forward who passed away with his brother on Friday in a accident. He was on a bicycle. He was hit by a car. The driver allegedly under the influence of alcohol. Jay Forster of Locked On Blue Jackets joins us to discuss Johnny Gaudreau, what he meant to the Blue Jackets, and the impact of this terrible tragedy on both the team and the community. Jay, talk to me a little bit about Johnny Gaudreau, both the hockey player and the man.
I think the thing that's going to stick with me with Gaudreau is, and again, I've seen a lot of, since the news broke early Friday morning, I've seen so many stories about like what a great person he was, or like funny stories. Like he was apparently known for like his pranks in Calgary, which is very funny. But like the thing that's going to stick to me, and I've got a lot of really great Johnny Gaudreau memories, but he chose Columbus at a time when no one else chose Columbus. You know, he was, I think it's fair to say, the biggest star that had ever chosen to be a Blue Jacket. He wasn't drafted here. He wasn't traded here. He chose to come here in free agency. And I think that is going to be like his lasting influence on this community is going to be, he chose us when he could have chosen, you know, he could have gone to New Jersey. He could have gone to Philadelphia. He could have gone to the Islanders. He didn't. He chose Columbus. And I think that's what's really going to stick with me more than the goals, more than, you know, the impact he had on the ice. I think it's going to be the off the ice impact that I think is really going to stick with me and stick with a lot of people as we kind of continue to grieve and mourn.
On the ice, was there one moment or a couple of moments that really stood out in your mind that just, you know, make you think about Johnny Gaudreau?
So for me, it's his first goal as a Blue Jacket, which I just saw someone else had posted on Twitter not long ago. And I remember the goal so clearly that like I knew what the goal it was before they even got to the end of it. And it was, I think, the fourth game of the season against the Vancouver Canucks. The Blue Jackets hadn't won a game yet that season. And he hadn't scored a goal yet. And people were kind of getting antsy about it. And it was this like coast to coast, skate around three people, round the back of the net, wrap around goal. And I remember watching that and just thinking like, things are going to be different in Columbus. Like, I know that I don't want to say underperformed in Columbus, because I think he did a pretty great job while he was here, but he didn't ever hit that 100-point mark that he hit in his last season in Calgary. And I think that was a disappointment for a lot of people. But I remember watching that goal and thinking, yeah, now I understand why people in Calgary talk about him the way that they do, because he's just one of those players that looks like nothing's happening and then everything is happening. And so his first goal as a Blue Jacket is going to be something that I think I'm going to remember for a long time, just because of the way it made me feel about him and kind of about the team in general.
And then, as far as his involvement in the community, Johnny Gaudreau, the teammate, Johnny Gaudreau, the member of the Columbus community.
It's fascinating that, and I feel like no matter how beloved a player seems to be by like their team, by their fan base, there's always someone from another team or whatever, or another fan base that is like, well, I don't like him because of this. What we've seen has been this outpouring of, and I've seen it from fans of every single team, about how much he loved the game, how much he like just played with this kind of unfettered joy, and he had a big impact on this team. He had a big impact on the community. I think, I don't want to dwell too much on the sadness of this event, but all of the Instagram stories that have kind of been rolling in from teammates and, the younger players on the team specifically, like Kent Johnson wore 13 growing up because he was a small forward that loved to watch Johnny Gaudreau, and he gave up 13 when Johnny came to Columbus. Cole Solinger grew up in the Calgary area. There's a picture of him as a young child wearing a Gaudreau jersey, So like, I don't think people realize the impact he had on what it means to be a small forward in this league. You hear the funny stories about how in his draft year, he was like hiding pucks in his jockstrap to try and desperately weigh over 140 pounds because he was still so small and undersized. And through all of that, he still made it as an NHL player and as an NHL star. The Columbus community, I think, one of the last time he spoke to the media as a Blue Jacket, he talked about Patrick Laine and talked about, we're waiting for Patrick to get out of the program. We wish him the best. He actually, while Patrick was in the program, he took over his Patrick Laine was doing like a not a challenge necessarily, but had committed to donating $1,000 for every goal that he scored this season. And that was going to go to a men's mental health charity in Columbus. And when he went into the program, Johnny Gaudreau took over that initiative and was like, for every point I get, goal, assist, it doesn't matter, I'm going to give $1,000 to this in Laine's name. And that's just the kind of, again, that's something that's going to stick with me, is that commitment to his teammate, that commitment to the community, and just, it's just such a loss, man,
I mean, even his nickname, Johnny Hockey, it just exudes the joy that he seemed to have playing this game.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's, he loved this sport, and I think it's easy to say, of course he was an NHL player. Of course he loved hockey. Otherwise, why would he be here? But like you said, Johnny Hockey, like, was his nickname. He was hockey for a lot of people, and beloved in Calgary. Outside the Saddle Dome in Calgary, there are hundreds of bunches of flowers and jerseys and tributes, bottles of purple Gatorade, which was his favorite flavor, packets of Skittles because that was his favorite candy. And there's similar happening in Nationwide as well. We're seeing stuff from people who don't follow the sport. We're seeing Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, tweeted about him. You look at what he did for USA Hockey as a younger player, and again, playing in the most recent World Championships on Team USA. Like, that was the last time I think that might have been the last time he played a game, would have been at that World Championships with Team USA. So, like, just to go back to what I talked about a little bit earlier, he's one of those guys that is, again, just kind of beloved by everyone. No one has a bad word to say about him, and that's how he's going to be remembered, is as a guy who loved his team, who loved the game of hockey, and who loved his family.
How does this impact the team right before training camp? I mean, how is the team, the players, the organization going to process this and move forward?
I've been struggling with this thought all day, because it feels so like we shouldn't even be talking about that. Like, hockey doesn't matter right now. And I genuinely, I don't know. Like, how do you put your skates on in 2 weeks knowing that one of your friends should be there with you and isn't. We talked a little bit about Sean Monahan, who signed in Columbus specifically to play with Johnny Gaudreau, who wanted to play with his best friend, and now he doesn't get to do that anymore. I don't know how players that were on the team in 2021 when Matisse Kivlenieks passed away, they have to go through this again. I genuinely not drawing on personal experience per se, but I know that the incident last season in the UK with Adam Johnson of the Nottingham Panthers died mid-season. That team didn't recover. They didn't play games for a month after the incident happened, and then and it's completely understandable, but as a team, they didn't. I think they won 2 games entirely for the rest of the season. So it sucks to think about. It really does, and I don't know yet how I'm going to have the conversation of here's how the Blue Jackets recover from this on the ice, because it feels like it's so far from everyone's thoughts. But I genuinely, if it was me, I don't know how I would pull on my skates in 2 weeks and get ready for training camp like normal. He was a huge part of this team. I know that there were critics saying that he was overpaid and underperforming his contract, but he was one of the faces of this team, and I don't know how the team is going to react to him being gone on the ice any more than I know how they're going to cope off the ice. I hope that the team has things in place for players to speak to, staff to speak to, because I think that's an underlooked thing is, the ushers, the people who would greet him, the security, people the equipment people, the office workers, they all interacted with him as well, so I really hope that the team and the NHL is giving these people all of the support that they need, because it's not just the 21 other men on the ice that need this, or the 20 other men on the ice. I can't do math on the fly. It's gonna have ripple effects, I think, for this team for a very, very long time.
No question about that. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media and your co-host?
So you can find me on Twitter at LO_. Nope, that's the show Twitter. LO_Blue Jackets is the show on Twitter. I'm at _Jacob Forster, JAKOBFORSTER. There will not be a show for a couple of days because I don't think that it's a show that we want to rush into. But we will at some point next week be recording a tribute episode to Johnny Gaudreau. We're going to look at all of the great moments from the 2015 All-Star game where he wanted to light his stick on fire for the skills competition and they wouldn't let him, to, stories of one time in college he wrote a paper on how to make a ham and cheese sandwich. There's just such a great personality off the ice. So we're going to talk about all of those great memories, all of the on the ice memories, and all of that stuff. So that's going to be probably Wednesday on Locked On Blue Jackets. You can find that wherever you get Locked On NHL. We are on all podcast apps and over on YouTube.
Jay, thank you so much, and just sorry we had to talk at this difficult time.
Yeah, thanks, Gil. I appreciate it.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So if your favorite team plays outside of your hometown, or you want to keep track of all the players on your fantasy league, or if you're just a huge football fan, this is the offer for you. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook.